The middle of a semester presents its challenges and stresses. Yet, it is the perfect time to reflect and make changes to your study habits and strategies. In this video, you will learn how to evaluate your progress and ensure that you are on track for success for the remainder of the term. So stay tuned to find out how to learn more through a mid-semester reflection. I feel that any video on reflection should start with this quote by psychologist and educational reformer John Dewey. Unfortunately, I have seen too many cases of students not reflecting on their experiences. For example, one student I had did not reflect on why they scored 34% the first time they took calculus, and so they scored only 30% the second time they took calculus. Fortunately, that was enough to prompt them to reflect and make changes. These changes resulted in them scoring 99% in calculus the third time they took it, and to maintain a high 90s average for the rest of their degree. In some sense, failing the course twice was one of the best things that happened to the student, because it did prompt him to reflect and to make changes. Of course, it is better to do this sooner rather than waiting until you have failed a course. A great time to do a reflection is a few days after you have received feedback on a major assessment. If your course does not have a major assessment before the middle of the term, then the halfway point of the semester also works. This is a great time to do a reflection because number one, you've had time to settle into a routine and hence can evaluate that routine. Number two, you've had a chance to learn about your instructor's expectations, so you can think about how to adjust your study strategies and habits to better meet those expectations. This is particularly important for first-year university students, as you've had time to see how university is different from high school. And number three, there is still time to make changes and improve your learning before the course ends. Okay, let's look at how to reflect. Start by writing the course name and the date at the top of a blank piece of paper. Next, make a list of your academic habits for that course. For example, how often are you going to class? Do you go to class prepared? On what days do you study? How long are your study sessions? And how early do you start working on homework? Make note of any changes as the course has progressed. For example, maybe you went to every class for the first 2 weeks, but have started missing more and more classes. Really try to list your habits for that course as accurately as possible. The reason to do this course by course is almost certainly you'll find that you have different habits in different courses. Now, make a list of the study strategies you are using for that course. Be as specific as possible. For example, rather than just writing, "I read the textbook," explain how you read the textbook. That is something like, "I only read the examples," or "I focus on highlighting key words," or maybe "I read the textbook very slowly and try to solve all the examples before I read them." Next, get the grades of all your assessments so far in the course and calculate the grade you have so far. That is, determine what grade you would have if the course ended right then. Now, critically evaluate your current level of learning. This will be easiest if you have written a test. If you have, then look carefully over your answers on the test. Identify what content you knew, what content you didn't know, and what content you thought you knew but didn't do well on. For content you thought you knew but got wrong, try to figure out what happened so you can prevent that from happening again. One way to try to determine whether you just had brain freeze or if you actually don't know it as well as you thought you did is to write down the question and to try to solve it the next day. If you can solve it correctly then, you obviously know it. If you can't, then you know you need to study it more. For any content that you don't know, think about how you studied it and what you can do differently to try to learn it better in the future. For more information about the levels of learning and what strategies to use to move to the next level, see my video on effective studying. Lastly, use everything you have written down to examine your habits and strategies and see what positive changes you can make. Ask yourself if you are meeting your course goals. If you aren't, figure out the things that are holding you back. For example, if you've been studying for many hours but not getting the grades you expected, then you probably need to reevaluate your study strategies. For any bad habits you have, think about what is causing the bad habit and what you can try to do to fix that. For example, if you have started skipping classes, then try to determine why you've been skipping and what you can do to change that. When reflecting, number 1, reflect carefully. You want to be as precise as possible. Note that reflecting carries with it a degree of anxiety. We naturally do not want to look at our mistakes or flaws. However, we do need to examine these if we are going to improve. This is why it is a good idea to wait a few days after getting a test back before reflecting. You want to try to avoid gut reactions or emotions affecting your reflection. Number 2, avoid blaming others, as this will not lead to ways that you can improve. Number 3, avoid blaming yourself. The whole point of this exercise is to look at how you can get better. Putting yourself down does not help that. Number 4, give actionable items. That is, list things that you can actually change. Finally, number 5, list positives along with areas for improvement. Reflecting is not only about what you can improve on, but it is also about figuring out what you have been doing well. Let me demonstrate some of these points with an example. Say a student didn't do well on a test and just wrote down, "The test was too hard." This reflection is just a gut reaction. It is not suggesting any ways a student can improve, and it isn't looking for any part that the student did well on. How can they rephrase this reflection so that they have something to work with? One possibility is, I found the assessment difficult because, and then they could list the possible reasons why they found it difficult. Maybe the instructor had higher expectations than they realized. Maybe they didn't start studying early enough. Or maybe they didn't prepare under the same conditions as the test. Now that you have reflected, first, if you ever feel lost or unsure about what to do in a course, talk to your instructor or an academic advisor. They can provide you with guidance and suggestions of what your next possible steps could be. Otherwise, write up to 3 changes that you are going to make. I say up to 3 because it can be challenging to make any changes. So, by just focusing on making a small number of changes, you are more likely to succeed. Number 2, make a pledge to yourself that you are going to make these changes. Telling others about the changes you are making will really help keep you accountable. Number 3, use any new habits or strategies for at least a month before reflecting on them. Remember that it takes time to become proficient in a new strategy, and it also takes time to see improvements. In summary, reflection is the key to success. It helps us see our strengths and shows us how to work on our weaknesses. It turns that voice in your head that tells you what you did wrong into a voice that's telling you how to get better. That is, reflecting not only helps us improve, it also helps us be happier with ourselves. I hope you have found this video helpful. To learn more, watch these other informative videos. Thanks for watching!